Earlier this evening, I had one of our readers at the Dixie Heritage newsletter send me an email, and they'd asked me if I had watched the PBS NewsHour of September 19th, and I said no, I hadn't, but I was able to go online. I was able to bring down a copy of it and watch it. And they said, you really got to see Corey Stewart's interview. And so I did. It was about the last 10 minutes of that program. And I thought, wow, Corey did a great job. I said, if he did that great of a job with the material that they aired, I'd really love to see the material that did not air. Because essentially, the way these interviews work is you'll be interviewed for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes even a few hours. And they'll ask you questions, usually friendly questions, sometimes questions that have traps in them. But what they're doing is you're comfortable, you're talking freely. You think you're articulating your points and your position. But what's going to happen then is an editor is going to chop your interview up into 20 and 30-second sound bites, and those are what are going to air. And what's going to end up happening is those sound bites that are going to be broadcast are going to be you answering questions that you were not even asked during your interview. And Corey just didn't fall into any of the traps during this PBS NewsHour segment. And so I thought to myself, man, I mean, if I'd love to see the stuff that did not air. And so, anyways, we made a few phone calls and we were able to get the video, the unedited video that did not air. And it's broken down into 4 segments. And one of the segments was a rather lengthy segment, about 7 or 8 minutes, a great segment in which Corey defends Confederate monuments. And he just refused to say anything that they could chop up. And the interviewer tried her best to get him to fall into some traps, but he just wouldn't do it. And so they didn't even put any of that on the air at all. Just you just got to watch this for yourself. And Corey Stewart, for those of you who do not know, he is the Republican candidate. He's running against Tim Kaine in the Virginia Senate race this coming November. And so, anyways, this isn't really the kind of stuff that I can put on the Dixie Heritage Hour radio show, but yet it's stuff that I want our newsletter readers to be able to see and to benefit from this. And I also want for our radio audience to have access to it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the Corey segment raw, unedited interview up there. And then what I'm going to do is upload it and let our readers and our listeners know where the link is so that they can go to it. So anyways, here
What
it
is
is.
the future of the Republican Party? Because frankly, the demographics of the Republican Party right now don't have a lot of life to them. They don't have decades and decades ahead. What is the future for this party? How do you deal with the party that some, fairly or not, see as racist?
Well, I think that the future of the Republican Party is very, very bright.
But how do you broaden who's in the party?
Why do I say that? Because the ideas that are behind the Republican Party of equal justice for all, of opportunity, of lower taxes, of enforcing the law, of protecting our families, of being strong on national defense, all of these are things that people support, whether they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, whether they're gay or straight. These are all issues that everybody supports. And yes, while it is true that the Republican Party right now, we don't have enough minorities inside of the party, eventually people will join the party that best supports their views, and the Republican Party have the best views, the most pro-American views, the views of economic growth, the views of being strong with law enforcement and protecting our laws, protecting our families. These are all good things that appeal to everybody of every race and ethnicity.
I think I'm still trying to discover, because you're so thoughtful and read in on all this. I'm still trying to get it, though. Obviously, whether you think it's fair or not, the Republican Party is being tagged in minority communities as being anti-minority.
That's the Democrats.
That has nothing to do with Republicans?
No, it doesn't. It has almost everything to do with the Democrats are fearful that they're going to lose their base.
But it has nothing to do with Republicans and their policy towards, say, urban housing, their policy towards urban schools. It has nothing to do with Republicans and the people who are running, some of them as Nazis, as Republicans this year.
You know, the Democrats think that they can appeal to minority voters by talking about government programs and handouts. And the truth of the matter is that African Americans are no different from Caucasians and Asians and Hispanics, and that we all want jobs. People want good jobs. They want safe neighborhoods. They want good schools. They don't want more government programming. They just want the basics. And they can thrive, but if they need that, they can do that on their own. But
that's the argument you guys have long tried to make, and it's not, for some reason, it has yet, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think it is working.
I know Paul Ryan, there, okay, all right.
I think it is working.
Maybe.
I mean, look, I mean, the Republican Party
I get that Jack Kemp argument. I get it, but you know what I mean? It's not, I think Jack Kemp thought by now you guys would be much farther along.
Well, I mean, the Republicans, we control the House, we control the Senate, we control the presidency, we control a majority of governorships and state legislatures. I mean, I think the Republican Party, if you take a step back, we're very successful. As long as we stick to the ideas and that idealism, that Americans can govern themselves, that Americans can prosper on their own. You just have to get government out of the way. You have to provide for good schools, good roads, good infrastructure. And you've got to protect their families. You have to have good law enforcement. You have to have a good military, strong military.
Why aren't there more like black Republicans running for office? Why aren't there more black Republicans in the cabinet?
Well, there are more now than ever before, I think.
There are fewer blacks in the cabinet.
I mean, when I'm on the campaign trail, you'd be very surprised at how diverse, my following is. And I'm not alone as a Republican in this. I think that what the Democrats are so afraid of is that as white working class Americans left the Democratic Party, went to the Republican Party, the Democratic Party is worried that African Americans and Asians and Hispanics who are working class are also migrating over to the Republican Party. It's already happening. I mean, you can see this in the poll results of African Americans having a rising support for President Trump. I have a hard time believing that somebody actually believes in this white nationalism stuff. To me, it's just so un-American. And if anybody has those views, I would ask them to reevaluate their own views and to reevaluate themselves. That's never going to make them happy. There's no future in that. America has to be seen as one. We have to think of ourselves as one American nation. Not as white Americans, not as black Americans, not as Hispanic Americans, but Americans. And it really disturbs me, especially on the left, always trying to divide Americans along racial lines. I don't think it's good for this country.
I hear you saying that you question whether white nationalism exists, that you're not even sure that it does exist. We've been out there reporting it does exist. There's a question maybe about the scale of it.
Yeah.
Have you not seen those stories? It's because some of the people you have disassociated yourself with are white nationalists.
I don't even know what that means. I'm not. I mean, honestly.
But I just want to understand. Are you questioning whether there is a movement of people in this country who are white nationalists?
What I'm saying is I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. If there are people who think that way, I can guarantee you that's a very, very few people who think that way.
You're not familiar with Paul Nealon's views, even after you've disassociated yourself with him?
And I've disavowed Paul Nealon after I found out that he had those views.
So you are familiar with...
Well, he has those views, but whether or not there's a white, quote-unquote, white nationalist movement, I'm very skeptical of that, because I just haven't seen that.
I'm not, okay.
I mean, you can't say, of course there are people who are still racist out there. There are racist people out there, and I think Paul Nealon's views are absolutely heinous.
So you're dividing sort of someone who's racist.
No, what I'm saying is that
you're saying that's different than white nationalists? Yeah, which is fine.
I think there's a few crackpots out there. But I don't think there's any large movement, and I certainly haven't seen one in Virginia or any place else in this country for that matter.
Before the Charlottesville rally, I don't know if you saw the Vice story, among others, where there were video of white men with torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us."
It was repugnant, yeah.
It was also racist. And that seemed to be a large group of people who were a white movement. Does that not qualify?
Well, you know, you got to remember, I mean, the people who came out to Charlottesville and had all that tiki torch, bizarre stuff, heinous, they came from all across the country. I think that in this country, there is, of course, there's racism, but I don't think it's anywhere near the scale that some of the media and the left wing in this country would like people to believe. I think for the most part, I would say 99% of Virginians are good people who are not racists, who simply want the same things for their children as everybody else. Whether they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, they want good schools, good roads, they want jobs, they want a strong American defense. And I think that we're overemphasizing race in this country.
Let's talk about what your thinking is on Confederate monuments and in general the Confederacy and where it fits today.
I see these monuments as American monuments. It's part of our history, and not all parts of American history are glorious. I mean, some parts of our history are sad, and some parts of our history, we're ashamed of parts of our history. The history of slavery is a stain on the fabric of American history. But we can't ignore it, and we can't try to cover it up, and we can't rewrite history, and we can't remove historical monuments or historical homes. It is part of who we are to this day, and I just think that you know, I love history. I think we need to study it, but the one thing we must never do is to remove it.
Do you understand the argument, or tell me your understanding when you hear people say history is something we're not trying to bury, but monuments celebrate something. And when they see a Confederate monument, they see a celebration of a group that extolled and wanted to keep slavery going beyond just historically marking it. Monuments as celebrating that, to some are offensive.
Most of those monuments were not placed there to celebrate history. Excuse me, let me say that again. Most of those monuments were not placed there to celebrate slavery. Far from it.
But they were there to celebrate a large organization, a nation that was fighting to protect slavery.
So these monuments were placed there by a generation who lost loved ones, brothers, sisters, in some cases 16-year-old boys who perished in the Civil War. And as that generation was dying off in the later 1800s and early 1900s, they wanted to make sure that their loved ones who died in the Civil War were remembered. And you know, a lot of these monuments are to the generals, you know, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Jeb Stuart. But many of them are, these monuments are made to the anonymous Civil War soldier who died in the war. And I just think that it's wrong for our generation, 150 years later, after the Civil War, to pass judgment on them and to remove the history that they have erected.
Is it wrong for anyone to be offended by them?
No, but I mean, you know, we can't remove everything that somebody's offended by. And, you know, we got to remember that while some may be offended, others see this as a memory of their families in many cases who were in the Civil War, and many of whom had family members who died in the Civil War.
Do you understand why people hear this argument in favor of Confederate monuments and they see a racial issue there? There is clearly a racial divide. Blacks generally are very offended by those monuments. You're saying that the Republican Party should be beyond race, but you're making an argument that hits along racial lines. Can you speak to that and why people should not see you as someone representing white views, even when some people see it that way?
I don't agree with that at all. And you know, when I went down to the monument to Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville, this is well before August of 2017. So in February of 2017, I went down there with an African-American friend of mine, Thaddeus Dion Alexander. And we went there to do a Facebook Live to protest the city of Charlottesville's decision to remove that monument. And we were met by probably 100 protesters who were saying, white supremacists, yada, yada, yada. The thing is, there was only one African American person in that entire group, and that was my friend who was with me on that side. All of those protesters were white liberals. They were not African Americans. These monuments have been there for 100 years or more. They haven't been offending anybody. Nobody's given them any thought. We have roads and schools that are named after Confederate generals and so forth. I think we just need to leave it alone. These monuments were not controversial before white liberals started to try to remove them.
You're not denying that African Americans are offended by Confederate monuments.
I don't think that's the case. I think that most African Americans don't want to remove our history. I think most African Americans understand that we need to move forward.
What is that based on? What is that?
That is based on, I meet voters each and every day. I'm more in tune with what's going on in Virginia than probably anybody else, because I'm meeting voters every single day.
And you hear black voters telling you they want to keep Confederate monuments.
What I hear from voters, whether they're black or white or Hispanic or Asian, is the same thing. What are we going to do about rampant problems with illegal immigration? What are we going to do about our schools? What are we going to do about our roads? We need better jobs. And that's what I hear. I don't hear anybody out there saying it's really important that we remove Confederate monuments. Nobody's saying that, regardless of the race.
Nobody's saying that to you.
Nobody. I'm not hearing that from anybody, and I meet tons of voters. And I don't just go to Republican events. I go to state fairs. I go to schools. I go to churches. I was at the mosque last week. I mean, people are not talking about Confederate statues. This is something that some in the media want to talk about, and a lot of people on the left want to talk about, but it's not what the average Virginian is talking about.
You are saying Confederate monuments for you is an issue of history. It is not related to race. However, there are some who are fighting for the Confederate monuments and who were present at rallies that you've been at for whom it is a race issue and who say that Confederate history is a part of white history. There are white nationalists fighting for Confederate monuments. Why associate yourselves with that group, and what does that do to sort of the image of Republicans?
Well, I certainly don't agree with their view on that.
Yeah, but they're associated with your same message and just rallies you've been at.
You can't stop people from coming to a rally. You cannot, people of all shapes and sizes and different beliefs come behind your candidacy, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You can only be responsible for what you believe and what you say. I can't possibly be responsible for what all the thousands of supporters that I have, what they think, because they have they have a diversity of views. So I'm not going to take responsibility for anybody else's views other than my own.
Do you and do Republicans need to do more then to castigate those people and tell them they're not welcome in this party?
I think we've already done that.
How so?
I think Republicans, including myself, we're always saying, we absolutely disavow racism. We absolutely disavow any sort of bigotry or racism. What the Republican Party needs to stand for is making sure that the quality of life for average working Americans improves, that their schools get better, that their roads get better, that we're supporting our military and our national defense, that we're securing our border and making our families safer. That's what people care about. That's what the Republican Party needs to care about and focus in on. And if we do, we will not lose seats this November. We will gain them. I think for the most part, I would say 99% of Virginians are good people who are not racists, who simply want the same things for their children as everybody else. Whether they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, they want good schools, good roads, they want jobs, they want a strong American defense, and I think that we're overemphasizing race in this country.
I would love it if we didn't talk about race, if we didn't have to talk about race. Yeah. I think most Americans of every race would love to, wish somewhere were beyond race, but it's so ingrained in the history and fabric of how our society works.
Don't you think we've moved on?
It sounds like you've moved on.
Well, I think I think America's moved on. I think that.
Do you think Black and Hispanic America has moved on past race?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, just think about how America is so mixed today, and it's been very positive for this country. You know, just a generation ago, there were segregated schools, and today we're all together. You know, we share the same neighborhoods, we share the same localities, we share the same schools, and you even have increasingly more mixed race families, and that is good for America. America has moved on, but a lot of Democratic politicians, race hustlers, are still out there, still trying to divide America by race, and I think that's wrong.
Do you believe that a white child born in this country today has precisely the same opportunity as a child of color who is born in this country today?
I think that we're all created equal. I think that everybody should have the equality of opportunity in this country.
But does it exist?
And I think that we need to make we need to lift everybody up. And I don't think we need to be focused on the racial division.
I get that, and I'm not trying to trap you. I'm really asking a legitimate question here, I think. If you're saying that America has moved past race, you just said America has moved past race, I want to ask you, do you think that a person of color faces any limitations because of their color now? Or has America moved past
I
it?
think for the most part, I really don't believe that most of our issues are due to race. I think that...
You think like an individual who is Black or Hispanic does not have fewer opportunities?
No, I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
I think it has to do with socioeconomics. I think that a child who is white, who's born in a trailer park to a single mom, is going to have fewer opportunities than a child who, you know, grew up with both parents in a middle-class neighborhood. I mean, that's just a fact. But it has very little to do with race, and it has all to do with socioeconomics. And I think one of the great things about where the Republican Party is moving today is that we are now attracting more people who grew up in working-class neighborhoods with fewer opportunities, and they see the Republican Party as the party of prosperity, the party of opportunity. And that's what we have to do. And these working class people of all races, if we continue to appeal to the working class average people out there, the Republican Party will truly rise as the people's party in this country.
How would you know if your thoughts are not just what you hope to be true? You have a view of this country that matches, I think, what people idealize about this country: equal opportunity, the hope that anyone can get ahead here. How would you know that you're not just believing what you want to be true of this country and not looking more deeply to find out if there are problems along racial lines?
Well, because this is something that is not very well known about me, and that is that I've been governing for 12 years the most racially mixed county in Northern Virginia. It is a composite of America, and it is racially diverse, it is diverse socioeconomically, and I've been having my ear to the ground and won 4 elections here. And I could not have done that if not for the support of people in my community of all races, of all religions, of all ethnicities. I think I'm very much in tune with what people are thinking.
I didn't originally plan to do this, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put up now about a 9-minute clip here, and it is the actual segment that aired on the PBS NewsHour. So you can see what the liberals have done with what you just saw and how they chopped it up and what they turned it into, and basically used it not just to go against Corey Stewart, but they outright pretty much call any Republican congressional candidate in these upcoming midterms a racist and a white nationalist. They even go after the president, taking what little bit of a clip of a comment that he made at a rally way out of its context to do so. But I'm going to go ahead and put that up there for you as well. so that you could see
Now
that.
to a sharp divide for Republicans over race. This year, a handful of GOP congressional candidates have openly expressed racist views. Others in the party disagree over how and how often to address the issue. Lisa Desjardins reports from Virginia. And a warning, this story includes some disturbing, violent, and racist content.
In a neatly appointed home in Northern Virginia,
It's so nice to meet you.
potential donors are sizing up an unconventional candidate, Corey Stewart.
I did see that. Yeah, I did.
The GOP nominee for U.S. Senate is a divisive figure, loved by some conservatives as ardently anti-illegal immigration and pro-Trump,
We'll be supporting the president. We're going to be bringing back manufacturing jobs.
but detested by others in the Republican Party as someone they see as stoking racial divide.
What makes crimes committed by illegal aliens so especially heinous and so especially tragic is that it's 100% preventable.
Stewart flatly denies accusations of racism.
I think Republicans, including myself, we're always saying, we absolutely disavow racism. We absolutely disavow any sort of bigotry or racism. What the Republican Party needs to stand for is making sure that the quality of life for average working Americans improves. From the great state of Wisconsin.
But early last year, he supported Paul Nealon, an anti-Semite who ran for Congress in Wisconsin. And a month later, Stewart appeared with Jason Kessler, a white nationalist.
You will not replace us!
Kessler later organized the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where a protester was killed by a white nationalist driving into the crowd. Stewart insists he did not know the men's views at the time, and he has disavowed them. When he took to Facebook with his own views on Charlottesville, Stewart blamed liberals and didn't mention white nationalists. He said conservatives were under attack.
Unfortunately, in the aftermath of Charlottesville, there will be those on the left, the media, the Democrats, the liberals, who will use this as an excuse to further crack down on conservative speech.
The National Republican Party is not supporting Stewart, but he's far from their biggest nightmare. In New Jersey, Republican congressional nominee Seth Grossman shared a racist article saying that black people are a threat to all who cross their paths. Another Republican congressional nominee, John Fitzgerald in California, has focused his campaign on denying the Holocaust. In Illinois, there's neo-Nazi Arthur Jones, who ran unopposed in his GOP congressional primary. And in North Carolina, State House candidate Russell Walker's website charges that Jews are the children of Satan. In all of these races, state and national Republican parties have withdrawn support for the candidates.
We have got to distance ourselves at every single turn as emphatically as we can from anything related to white nationalism.
John Whitback is the former chairman of the Virginia Republican Party. He stepped down from that position shortly after Corey Stewart won the nomination.
Our ideas are the right ones for everybody, from Muslims to Indian Americans to South Asians to African Americans, and that's what we got to get back to as a party quickly.
It is a deep identity divide. Stewart sees race as a political weapon used by Democrats. A Minnesota native, he showed us his historic colonial-era home in Northern Virginia. Stewart points to the diversity of his county, where he's repeatedly been elected chairman of the Board of Supervisors.
I've been having my ear to the ground and won 4 elections here. And I could not have done that if not for the support of people in my community of all races, of all religions, of all ethnicities.
We talked at length, and he gave direct, skeptical views not usually spoken out loud by politicians.
Are you questioning whether there is a movement of people in this country who are white nationalists?
What I'm saying is I haven't seen it.
If you're saying that America has moved past race, do you think that a person of color faces any limitations because of their color now? Or has America moved past it?
I think for the most part, I really don't believe that most of our issues are due to race. I think that...
And you think like an individual who is black or Hispanic does not have fewer opportunities?
I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
I think it has to do with socioeconomics.
This person is full of baloney.
Stephen Taylor is a political science professor at American University. He points out racism has been woven into campaigns since the nation began. Taylor does not believe Republicans like Stewart, who say that they or their party have moved past race.
Does Mr. Post-Racial want me to live on his street, or does Mr. Post-Racial want 7 of 10 people on his street to look like me? He probably doesn't.
You think that idea is just a cover-up?
I think it's a lie. If you believe that the Easter Bunny's coming on Easter and Santa Claus is coming on Christmas Eve.
Meantime, in the past month, voters in Florida and Iowa received racist robocalls from a white nationalist group. In Florida, the calls portrayed Andrew Gillum, the black Democratic nominee for governor, as a minstrel caricature.
Well, hello there. I is Andrew Gillum, and I'll be the mayor of Tallahassee.
And, of course, the highest-ranking Republican, President Donald Trump, has repeatedly used sharp words about race.
Our African American communities are absolutely in the worst shape that they've ever been in before, ever.
Some see this kind of talk as defying political correctness. Others say it's offensive. Some, like supporters of Corey Stewart, see racism as exaggerated.
If you don't agree with me, you're a racist or you're a Nazi. I mean, come on, give me a break. Give me a break.
I seem to draw a lot of protesters, though.
But other Republicans see a serious party problem, allowing and stoking hate. It is an identity crisis spilling onto the ballot this fall over who Republicans are and who they want to be.
And Lisa joins me now. So Lisa, a lot of important reporting there. What do these racial overtones tell us about the midterms this year? Do you expect race is going to be actually an issue in these campaigns?
It depends on where you're looking, but overall, the NAACP's did a survey, and they said that African American voters do think this year's midterms is more important than in 2014. They believe turnout will be up, and that's important for Democrats, which is where African Americans usually vote, because Democrats saw that turnout of minorities go down 2 years ago. That helped President Trump, actually. So there's that, the turnout issue, and then there's also candidates of color who are running who seem to be helping other Democrats on the ballot, including Andrew Gillum in Florida.
So you mentioned the Republican Party.
Yeah.
You interviewed the former chair of the party in Virginia. What is the party officially saying about all this?
It runs the gamut. In some cases, we've seen the National Party have a very clear message, and in the case of New Jersey, saying bigotry cannot be accepted here. We will not accept this candidate. That's Seth Grossman running for Congress. In North Carolina, however, the state party was a little more gentle in saying, because of this man's past actions, we are separating himself. Now, I also want to say it's not always the party in control here. In the case of Illinois, where we have the neo-Nazi Arthur Jones running, he has openly said that he has snookered the Republican Party, that he's using them for his own ends, and in that case, the Republican Party ran ads against him.
So, and finally, what do you think, Corey Stewart, the candidate for the Senate in Virginia, what is his candidacy? What does he say about where we are on all this?
This was not an easy story to report because it's very complicated, and so is Corey Stewart. He is someone who is convinced that he is not racist, and there are no overtly racist statements ever attached to him, but he did associate with people who were clearly on the fringe. And on the other hand, he's got a diverse county, and he does participate and connect with all these communities. But I think what he expressed to me in the interview were thoughts that I had heard from white politicians, just not on camera before. These are thoughts that I think are common in the Republican Party, that they think white people are held to a different standard. Now, I think these thoughts are also something that are controversial with minorities who see them as not helpful and in some cases racist. My conclusion from a lot of this reporting is that the conversations are getting farther apart. Here was a man who says he's not racist, but I don't think he hears what the minority community is saying right now.
Well, it is an important story, complicated story. Thank you, Lisa.
And more online, too.
And more online. Lisa Desjardins, we thank you.
Well, there you have it. I want to thank the PBS NewsHour for making these videos available freely as they have. I will say this, that was a great service that they have performed, even though we may not agree with them ideologically on some things politically and so forth. We're more conservative, they're more liberal, however you want to look at it. Most news agencies would not give the raw, unedited feed of their interviews like the PBS NewsHour has, nor would they give them without charging money for them, nor would they allow a group like ours to just freely rebroadcast it. But yet they have, and so we want to applaud them for that, and we want to say that we have a great admiration for them and for their integrity in doing so, and I just want to make a note of that, and also properly acknowledge them and so forth. Anyways, it's late. It's pushing 1 o'clock in the morning. I really wasn't planning on filming anything like this. This just presented itself, and I thought, you know what, I need to get this out there, and I also needed to get it up and online and everything before we got our next Friday's newsletter out. And so I need to do it now, and so hope the information is thought-provoking in some way. Anyways, go to our website, www.dixieheritage.net, and if you haven't already done so, sign up for our newsletter. It's absolutely free, no cost, no obligation. We'll send it to you every Friday. All we need is your email address, and when you give that to us, we'll also send you a free ebook copy, PDF copy, of my best-selling book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. So until next time, this is Dr. Ed from TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. God bless.